CVL, thank you for joining us at Capital Conversations, where it's just a spitfire set of questions asked of people such as yourself, who are leaders in industry, media, and other industries. We started this in Brand Capital during the lockdown, and it's flourished quite well. So with that short introduction, I don't need to introduce CVL to most of you who worked with him, worked for him, perhaps some juniors, and so forth. So you guys know him, but for the rest of you, he heads WPP, and I think that says a lot. And extremely experienced in media in India and abroad. So here we are. Questions ready, CVL?
Yes, all set.
So let's do this format, guys. Let's say 5 minutes per question. We'll have an answer, and then if you guys have any questions, you just email them in that, not email, send in that Zoom thing to me, and I'll ask after the first 4 or 5 questions that I have, which is also from the group. A lot of feedback we've got. Here's the first one. You know, COVID's shaken a lot of businesses. I'm sure COVID's shaken your business, shaken our business, is shaken. I don't know a single business not shaken by COVID. Even the ones making money, a lot of money during this period, like Amazon and some online guys, they're also shaken. They're all struggling to meet demand. So, and growth and focus, a lot of things have shifted. So, and then consumer brands, some of them are doing well, some are hurting in this. So, kindly mute, please. So there is a huge amount of chaos going on. Based on your opinion, based on what you're seeing, all your clients, your client base, how are top consumer brands changing their marketing strategy to adapt to this new world? It's a somewhat open-ended question. Feel free to use examples if you can, please, because we just want to learn from your experience. Kindly mute.
Okay, so if I were to, by the way, before I answer that question, there's something I just wanted to say to all of you right at the start. I really cherish those 2 years I spent at the Times Group. It was called Treaties then. And I must say that was the only time in my entire career that people at home finally understood what I do and what my company does. The rest of my life, I've been in media agencies, trying to explain to my mother and my father-in-law what a media agency does or an ad agency does. I've not succeeded. But when I was in Times of India, it was clearly not. So thanks to those, and obviously amazing memories of those 2 years. Sammy, coming to your question, the minute we went into lockdown, it was just to give you a cricket analogy. It was as if marketing, brand building, etc. Everyone was playing Test cricket, and suddenly 4 hours later, you were asked to play T20 cricket. That was the way it hit us. So the rules are broadly the same, the skills are broadly the same, but the format has suddenly changed. Everything's got disrupted. You need to kind of cater to this new world. So if one goes back to even the basic principles of marketing, which all of us have grown up on, the 4P, or later on there was a 5th P which got added, which all of you know is purpose. So if you look at the 4 plus 1 Ps, as I call it, we've seen in the last 2 months, a lot of change in approach and all of that. Now we can say how much of it will stick and how much of it will remain a new approach. We'll see going forward. But just to quickly touch upon these, I mean, if you look at products, I think very clearly anything which is to do with health, hygiene, wellness, or anything that gives consumers the comfort in very torrid and treacherous times like these are getting dialed up. So clients who have products like that in their portfolio, for example, ITC has produced more Savlon in a few days than they produced in the entire year of last year. And as you know, now they even come up with the 50 paise offering. So those kind of things are really getting dialed up by clients. Clients are also getting into adjacent areas to cater to demand. As you're probably aware, Alan Solly, Fab India, they're all making face masks today. Jagjit Industries, one of our clients, which is into liquor, is now making sanitizers. And even P&G has got into making masks and sanitizers. Although initially what they're doing is to more for donation, but they're seriously looking at these lines as well. So I think, so the short point really on product is everyone's dialing up anything which is of huge value given the current scare and readjusting the portfolios accordingly. Then, of course, there is the whole the value proposition. India, as it is, was a very price-conscious market, but all the research we've done in the last couple of months has shown, again, a lot of shift towards value buying. Value in the sense people are becoming even more price-conscious. So some clients, some corporates in the past were on a major premiumization drive, and I think they're the ones who are kind of taking a bit of a hit now. And I think the ones with the more broad-based portfolio, the ones which are catering to the lower end of the spectrum, are the ones who are kind of gaining. So I think everyone's quickly trying to adjust to this new, even more value-conscious consumer in the short term. The other area where we've seen very interesting changes, perhaps the most radical, are in distribution. The third P of place, as it's called. If you look at the amount of hyper-local distributors that have finally saved the day for many of us. So many of these large corporates have gotten into tie-ups with them. And I'm sure you've read about some very interesting associations, collaborations. We've had a role to play in quite a few of them, actually, getting our large, for example, CPG companies and some of the technology companies, food distribution companies to actually get together and help in distribution. You'll also see an increased trend of D2C, direct-to-consumer brands and services, and I think that's a huge opportunity area for players like the Times Group to start looking at as some kind of a revenue model, revenue stream going forward. And then finally, when it comes to advertising, communications, etc., which is really the main service that we offer. Of course, we are dealing in with a consumer who's even more, I would say, first of all, not just stressed but worried, anxious. So I think what we try and say is to look at everything through a COVID filter. Don't be flippant. Don't over amplify any of the things that you would normally do. Try and play with the straight benefits, and you would have seen. I guess most of you would have noticed the tone of advertising has changed actually in the last couple of months. And finally, purpose. Purpose was actually, frankly, in many cases, more of a fashion statement. Brands and corporates started talking about we need to be purposeful, etc. But I think in the last 2-3 months, a lot of brands, the ones where maybe it was more a flaky kind of an approach, maybe have got caught out, and the ones whose purpose truly resonates with consumers are the ones which probably have done well and will continue to do well. Again, there the learning is, consumers are don't just look at advertising and judge whether a brand is being purposeful or not. I think brands increasingly need to take purpose into more of action and do stuff and not just talk about stuff. And again, that's some of the advice that we've been giving our clients. So in short, there have been quite a few interesting developments in the last two months. Many of them we will take forward, but I would say the broad principles are still available for us to kind of stick to.
Thank you. That's a wonderful answer. Thank you, buddy, because you pegged all those answers to the P's that we all think about when we think about solving a problem, and it's very helpful guide for us to think through. Now, you did touch upon brands like Savlon, from alcohol to sanitizers, products and needs of the moment. So consumption has moved a little bit away, actually a lot away from luxury, so-called wants, to so-called needs, essential goods, and so forth. So this has really opened the window for us into a lookout that we didn't really know. This generation have seen that in elsewhere in the world, but not us. So as these buying decisions of people have changed, they are changing. Some of these changes are going to stick. Some of those changes are going to fritter away. How is advertising consumption, as we like to use the word consumption here, essentially ad spends, how is that expected to change, grow, degrow, shift? What's your view?
Okay, I'll take a step back and I'll just talk about what we picked up, real data and research that we've done over the last 8-9 weeks. We have agencies like Kantar and Mindshare, etc., within WPP, which are doing these weekly panels to figure out the sentiment, the mood, the purchase basket, the issues consumers are facing, etc., etc. We tabulate all that data and we get some very interesting insights. To take you through the journey of the last 8 weeks, obviously no surprises that in the first couple of weeks, almost all the worry was not about COVID and not about health, but the worry was about, am I going to get my bread and eggs for tomorrow? Am I going to keep my job? if I can't pay rent, what will my landlord do, and so on. So the first 2-3 weeks, there was hardly any worry to do with COVID, with all the other stuff that was going on the news channels. It was more an existential kind of a crisis. That was in terms of the sentiment. And in terms of purchase basket and buying behavior, it was, again, no surprises. It was skewed to all the staples, all the basic stuff that people were hoarding and buying up a lot more of rice, atta, wheat, and stuff like health and hygiene products, etc. Things like soft drinks, snacky foods, and all your beauty and personal care, all of that went completely out the window and almost crashed in the first 2-3 weeks. Now, if you start looking at the last 1 or 2 weeks of data, which I was doing yesterday, it's very interesting to see that slowly some of these things are coming back. But before I get to that, let me talk about sentiment. Now, consumer sentiment is now somewhere equally split between a health issue, and of course, if you look at some cities where we know the cases are more, it's even more pronounced there. People are actually now a bit worried about, this is really probably a crisis. What do I need to do? Do I need to more immunity levels probably needed, what kind of checkups I need to go for in future, etc. So I think health is, and all of this is finally sunk in, which is good. Then people will take some action. And of course, the other worry still remains, but I would say it's more equal now. And if you look at the purchase behavior, it's interesting. All of these things are making a comeback with stocks back on the shelves. And of course, maybe a lot of people just getting bored sitting at home and doing the basic stuff, getting a bit more adventurous, back into snacking, back into soft drinks with whatever is available, of course. And beauty, personal care, cosmetics, etc. are also slowly coming back. So that's in terms of how the last 8-9 weeks have panned out. Now, in terms of ad consumption, again, I can answer it in 2 ways. Consuming the medium itself or the message. Now, obviously, the ad or the media consumption peaked, of course, in the first 2-3 weeks, right? We've seen record levels of TV viewership, record levels of interacting with digital media and print as well. Despite having distribution issues in many markets, I think almost the entire print industry was extremely nimble in terms of coming up with all the PDF versions. And I myself, and I think a lot of people I talk to, probably read more, and I read more dailies on various screens today than I ever did, because it's all easily available, and all of that happened. We've seen a tapering down again in the last 2-3 weeks. The TV viewership is not as it was in the first 2-3 weeks. In fact, it's coming down. It's not yet back to pre-COVID levels, but it's coming down. So what all of this tells us, Sam and team, is I don't think there's going to be a very radical change when we come out at the end of all of this. I think, by and large, if you look at our own prediction for this year we had put out a prediction of a 12.5% growth for the ad industry, which of course is never going to happen. We are not brave enough to put any number right now, but we're just saying that will not happen. But we had estimated that by the end of this year, TV would be about 42% of the total ADEX, digital would be about 30%, and print would be about 20%. And the rest would be all the other media put together. So that's what we had predicted at the start of the year. And so in terms of percentages, we'd probably broadly stick to that. If anything, TV could probably come down a bit and digital could go up a bit. But otherwise, that's the way the media mix is going to play out. And in terms of ad consumption, in terms of messages, yeah, like I said earlier, I think everyone's filtering messages through a COVID lens. And people are obviously very sensitive to what should be said and can't be said. I'll give you 2 examples from today, which I just happened to pick up in the morning to bring the point alive. Maybe some of you have seen this on Twitter. So there was one of these brands which put out a ad which said, if you get your maid to, do all the roti, etc. at home, she may have infection in her hand. So why don't you buy this machine which will knead your dough, etc. and you can then make rotis. There was immediately fire on Twitter, and the company had to immediately withdraw the ad, issue an apology, and say, okay, sorry, we made a mistake. There's a heightened sense of, being aware of things like this. And I also saw, for example, one of the big channels, broadcasters, has done some CSR work, and they've actually, instead of saying migrants, they've said, citizens who are homeward bound or some such thing. And they've got a lot of positive kind of mention, etc. So I think people's awareness about, how you need to phrase certain things, how you need to say certain things has really gone up manyfold, because everyone's looking at things through what we call a COVID lens. And again, some of this will stay for a while, but I think 6 months, 12 months down the line, a lot of what we used to do earlier, we would go back.
Good. I'm actually a little bit heartened to hear your answer that I myself is of the view that we will go as quickly as possible to normalcy. Normalcy now sounds very fancy. Just living a simple, boring, normal, staying in the office till 9 o'clock sounds very, very good to me, right? So we're all craving for the old normal to become the new normal, and it's not going to happen. Happy to hear from you that there is going to be some semblance of that, and that you agree with it. You talked about print, TV, digital radio, and so forth, and the mix. Obviously, we as a group, we have a print, we are by far the leaders in the country in that, and we have every other medium as well. And we are leaders in radio, and we have a lot of other media, as you know very well. Tell us a little bit about bundling these mediums in a situation like this, print plus digital, print plus other media and so forth, because the thing is, COVID's exposed us to certain mediums more during this lockdown forcibly, which, for example, me TV watching was not a thing at all. Now I'm watching TV a lot more. I'm forced. So I'm exposed. And I picked up some good things and some bad things. Obviously, everybody's impacted. What is your view on this bundling? Print versus digital, print with TV, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, okay, great question, Sam. Okay, I mean, before one gets into formats of TV versus print versus digital, I think just something, it's a learning for all of us. I think the last 2 months have taught us that when it comes to media and media consumption, the first thing we need to get to or head to is a credible and trustworthy source of that information. I think the one big failing, I would say, of the digital media community is inability to control fake news. Not just fake news, but also alarmist kind of news and things that really cause a lot of stress in society. And I think the broadcast sector also at times is held guilty on that count. Trying to be a little bit too alarmist and maybe increase the social tension that we have in a nation which already is sometimes running quite thin on some of these things. So if you ask me, I think print has really been, or the brands that have originated in print, I'm not using the word print, but more the brands that have originated from print, like the Times of India Group. I mean, if you ask me, unless you read it there, unless you see it from a trustworthy source like that, you wouldn't first of all even believe it or whatever. So I think that's really the starting point. So if over the years you have, as a brand, built up such an amazing reputation to be a credible and a trustworthy source of all kinds of news, then comes, I mean, obviously the question of, how do you then exploit that brand value across multiple channels, be it print, be it digital, or print getting into digital through PDFs, like what's happening now, or even TV and so on and so forth. So yes, I think there's a huge opportunity. I think there's a huge opportunity to do that, because as advertisers, as media buyers, we would find it very exciting to sit and, let's say, work out a solution for a client which is platform neutral. A solution which is rooted in some deep insights, and the guru of all of this is sitting on the panel, so Partha Sinha himself, and people like him, the kind of stuff we can do if we have a bouquet of platforms to offer our clients would be interesting and would be amazing. And given the strengths you all have across platforms, I think its time has definitely come.
Good. That's again, Siva, Partha, and all our leaders. That's very encouraging to hear from CVL that this thing that we believe in a bouquet of offerings is a very, it's important. Its acceptance in the market is going to become more important going forward than it already was. Thank you. Okay, now pivoting a little bit. If you take e-commerce, take Amazon. Amazon itself, I believe, crossed the 10 billion mark in its ad revenues sometime last year. Okay, so these guys who are e-commerce, they have a lot of eyeballs, a lot of time with each of those eyeballs. They're generating ad revenue, and they're becoming a dominant piece of the ad pie as a whole, and they take away from us, so to speak. And so there's a lot moving in that direction. Brands, products, manufacturers looking to partner with e-commerce platforms to push their products. And in India, more recently, we've seen instances where merchants are trying to partner with even WhatsApp to try and get delivery. And we know what Gears is trying to do with Facebook. We don't know what they're going to do, but we know they're going down that yellow brick road. How do you see this trend panning out for the advertisement industry? Because once this goes down, then it becomes more of a product sale through a channel, product positioning and product sale through a channel rather than a strategy. It becomes a push. How do you view this?
Yeah, so to kind of put it in perspective, let me just share some broad numbers here, and these are purely our estimates because it's difficult to get the real numbers. So if you look at 2019 data, the total AdX, which is about 80 to 85,000 crores in India, roughly 25% of that was on digital media or digital channels. And only 10% of that spend went on e-com platforms in our estimate. So in other words, spending on e-com platforms today is still quite small. It's about 2.5% of the total AdX, or you can say print is 10 times more. But it's growing. To be very honest with you, in fact, I was in several meetings during my Group M days, and this is almost 3-4 years ago, with some of the leading e-com platforms on this very topic, in terms of how do you help convert the platform into an advertising engine and so on and so forth. And the kind of big plans they had, then the kind of teams that they used to, they started hiring, so on and so forth. Now, if I look back at one level, I'm a little surprised that it's not taken off as much as one would have envisioned 2-3 years ago. I mean, it'll obviously grow in the future, etc. But maybe there are a whole bunch of issues which still need to be tackled. I think one is in terms of if you look at the large players that the large advertisers, rather the ones who really have the big bucks. Sometimes for them they're in a quandary, right? I mean, they don't know whether the guy is a competitor or is a media channel because of the access to data insights, etc., which they have, and some of them having their own house brands. So that's one. The other is, issues in terms of data, issues in terms of, knowing actually beyond a point what's really working, what's not, etc. And some of these things are not easy to kind of get by. So far, I think there've been some of these reasons why it's not really taken off. But yeah, going forward, we see this increasing in terms of share of revenue, and we have obviously it's easier for them because the deals are bundled along with the sales deals that they do. And yeah, I think the Jio Facebook deal again, I think is a game changer of sorts. One will wait to see in terms of how it's actually implemented on ground, but that's a very interesting idea, and it's probably going to give a huge fillip to local brands and the local kiranas, the local retail stores to actually ride that wave.
The question, I put the question in there because until 6 months, 8 months ago, until I started, and more recently in the last 2 months, I've shopped online myself. But until a year ago, until 2 years ago, I didn't have an Amazon shopping account at all, right? And then, so now I've learned a brand called Solimo, a brand called Prego. And these are brands I didn't even know. And these are brands promoted by Amazon, essentially. So they are becoming large brands. I think at sometimes some of these large Amazon brands could become billion-dollar brands in markets like America. And they're going to compete for the wallet of the individual. And so effectively, we'll have to plan. We as Brand Capital or we as Bennett Coleman will have to plan for such competition eating into the market share in every one of those places.
Yes, and I'll tell you something very interesting, which may have an opportunity for all of us. If you look at a traditional way of brand management and looking at market shares, you probably look at a Nielsen report or something else which lands up on your desk once in a month or once in a quarter and tells you this is what your share is among shampoos. Let's say you're a shampoo brand manager and you have according to a Nielsen report, you have a 25% share of the shampoo market. You're probably approaching your brand in a certain way. But if you actually try and calculate what's your market share on Amazon when somebody goes to buy shampoo, and if you take a screen grab and see all the other products and services that Amazon offers, which are not just shampoos, but all other ways in which somebody with hair like me can be made to feel, as satisfied as using a shampoo. Home salon services and all the other allied products and services. Suddenly, when we did this exercise just for the heck of it, and we found that brands which have a market share, the old world's way of 20-30%, probably have a market share of 2-3%. If you look at the choice that a consumer is given on these platforms. So, I mean, that's a concept which, I mean, some people call abundant markets, which is, I mean, the same thing goes for someone who's maybe a product manager, brand manager, Maruti, say, thinking that he has a market share of 50-60%. Yes, but that's in the four-wheeler segment, cars. But what's your market share in mobility overall? Is it 4%, 5%? So I think you start looking at, I think what technology and e-commerce and all have done is, I think they've changed the definitions of many of these things. It's no longer just a static market share or gain in market share. It's, how abundant can you paint the market out to be, and then what can you do in that space? So, which is why you're seeing trends like, brands getting into D2C, brands getting into services, and all of that. Which is why, by the way, Unilever paid, how much they paid to acquire the company in the US, $1 billion plus, because it was a home service kind of brand. So, yeah, dollar share.
Thank you, CVL. And one more question around the same digital media, because it's ever present for us. And you did touch upon this point of fake news, and also sometimes not fake news presented in a different way. Maybe not a politically correct way or a sensitive way or whatever is the correct terminology for it, because nerves are much more raw, much more sensitive, much more fragile during this period. So we'll have to choose the words right and the tone right and the messaging right. So what advice, and there is a lot of fake news. I mean, I've even read fake news research reports on hydroxychloroquine in the last 2 weeks, fake research papers. So the thing is, in your opinion, you must be seeing this with a lot of your clients, and you guys must be battling this. And we have a lot of clients, Brand Capital, and our brand strategy works with our clients as well, as you know well, to help them think through various things and they get their message out. In your opinion, can you give us 1 or 2 examples or ideas of how they can think about reinforcing that idea without falling trap to all these things, and they get the message out quickly, offensively, but being cautious?
Yeah, maybe I can answer this more from let's say an advertising lens, in terms of and some of the real life experiences we've had in the last 4 or 5 years. I mean, because we live in an age of social media, and every consumer has a voice and is free to say anything about brands. There's a lot of fake news going around about brands itself. So I can stick to that topic because it will make the same point anyway. So you have seen, I mean, one can argue if you go back in time about the Maggie controversy, how much of it was real, genuinely an issue, how much of it was hyped up and created. And then there have been all kinds of instances we have had to deal with for many of our very large clients who have been under attack. Somebody claimed that one of the very popular brands of atta had plastic in it. Somebody else claimed something else, some other skin cream, if you apply it, actually caused cancer, so on and so forth. And people kind of take to social media and do all of this. And it's today the processes that are there to kind of even remove a post on some of these global platforms is extremely tedious. And it takes forever, by which time the damage is already done. So I think there is a need for I mean, and this has to be tackled in various ways, right? I mean, on the one hand, we need to have proper whatever protocols, and at an industry level need to take a few actions, maybe with certain platforms, certain media which may not have the right processes. But I'm just wondering if there's a silver lining in this for again a credible media company or a media service to be able to offer clients such opportunities to kind of share their side of the story and be able to kind of quickly offer that, because clients at times like those are willing to do anything to rectify their brand image, but I don't think there are too many people or opportunities which are quickly available for them. So if somebody proactively has something in mind, it's almost as if you have a service on offer which can help a client. In fact, we as agencies have tried to put such things in place over the last few years, and I'm sure most agencies have done it. We have, for example, we run war rooms, we have data centers, we have teams. For some of our very, very large clients, we monitor conversations on a 24/7 basis. Even small things like if you run an ad with children from two different communities who kind of get together and celebrate a festival, suddenly there's a huge storm on Twitter, people taking sides, castigating the brand, etc., etc. So what we are as agencies trying to do is how do we get proactive? How do we, at times even warn clients that they're going to be falling into this trap? And once it happens, what are the protocols in place to kind of address that? So that's how we're trying to tackle so-called fake news from an advertising perspective. But it's also maybe something which one could look at creating into some kind of a service to fortify brands against these attacks.
I really appreciate that perspective. I hypothesize myself, just like how software companies need, computer users need virus, like Symantec, like Norton. These are companies that help protect our computers and our software from virus attack. In the future, advertising companies, I can reckon, will need to create defensive, offensive defense messaging to protect themselves against fake news. It's going to become worse. I don't think it's going to become better. So that's a very good point, CVL. Thank you.
Like you have the nice box in the Times of India every day, which is like a fact check box, right? Which checks out all the facts and puts things into perspective. So yeah, just creating some kind of a service like that would be interesting. So that brands get a platform and an opportunity on a credible medium to tell their side of the story.
It would be powerful. Thank you. Now I'll take questions from the group. Siva, Partha, you guys must be jumping to ask questions. Why don't you open it up?
Can I ask a question, Sammy?
Yeah, sure. Please.
Yeah. Picking up from where CVL kind of was taking it to a particular place where there are a lot of these platforms which are ad-supported platform, but it's difficult to take out a malicious piece of news from there, right? So could be about the advertiser itself. Coming to that versus, what happens if a slightly negative article gets published in a newspaper, right? All of our phones never stop ringing and stuff like that. Now, if I combine these two, do you think there is a possibility of brand safety being priced separately, which is happening across the globe? Do you think India is very far away from there, or?
No, we're not. Good question, Partha. And I think it's something which at least some of us in the industry have been crying hoarse and warning clients for a long time to come. So brand safety has finally come onto the radar. I wouldn't say of all advertisers, but I definitely know it's come onto the radar of maybe the top 20, 30 advertisers. And there are a few things that have happened. For example, there are like agencies like ourselves. We have whenever we do a media partnership or a media deal, especially the digital platform, there are certain brand safety guidelines that are structured into the deal itself. And there are third-party agencies today which actually you can set your brand safety protocols, because there are some. For example, a liquor client or you would get it, right? And or some of the brands which are advertising to certain TGs may kind of water down their brand safety guidelines a bit, but there could be others who have a very stringent brand safety norm. So for the benefit of others, you can actually define how and literally choose it for yourself. And then let's say the partnerships or the deals that we strike are done basis these protocols, and any deviation from this is penalized in terms of what we give. So, and with third parties coming in and all of this, I would say at some level it's been taken up. And the MMA, which is the Mobile Marketing Association, and I happen to be one of the founder members of that body. In fact, when we started off the MMA 3 years ago, brand safety, brand audit was one of the key agendas that we did take up. So I don't think it's got the kind of awareness across the wider industry that it should have got. But I think going forward, I'm sure it will.
Thank you.
So Srini, Sibyl, I have a question. See, I see you have observed digital very closely, and you have seen the evolution of digital, especially in recent times, and also you spoke about the kind of research some of your own companies like Kanta and us. For example, print means different. Used to mean maybe different things. Print means newspaper, means magazines, means many various forms. And obviously, over a period of time, it has evolved, and the dominant share of advertisement is today with newspapers, at least as far as print is concerned. Similarly, digital means many things to many people. So what I wanted to ask you is that what would be your definition of digital as a platform? I mean, definition of digital for consumption, whether of news, entertainment, social, sharing. There are many forms of digital across many platforms. So my question to you is that which segment of digital going forward would you bet big for advertisement? I'm not talking of subscription, but for advertisement, which segment, because of this digital, and you think is going to take away lion's share of advertisement?
Yeah, okay, Shiva. So, I mean, obviously, to start, when it started off, digital was all about literally the digital platforms and the Googles and Facebooks of the world. And I think slowly from there, we have now said that, I mean, digital, every news TV today, almost every news TV is a smart TV and is also kind of a digital medium in that sense. So that could also kind of come into digital. And then you have now all the publishers, print publishers, etc., getting onto digital with their own versions. So that is also digital. So actually, if you see today, and we have accordingly, captured in, for example, this year, next year, the TY studies, etc., that we do, we have tried to capture at least. It's not easy to always get data. Tried to capture the way the medium is evolving. Ultimately, I mean, every medium will become digital. I mean, the way things are going, right? Whether it's radio, out of home is already a lot of out of home is already digital. Radio streaming, one can say, is digital and so on. So, I mean, so that's the way the medium has kind of evolved, and the definitions have also evolved. Coming to your second part of your question, which is, which part of it is going to get more revenue? See, I think ultimately we'll head to, we're already headed in that direction, right? You'll have a pure subscription-based model, which will be, which are already popular and which will gain in popularity. And you'll have a pure advertising-based model, and you'll have, I think, a lot of hybrid models or freemium models, as they call it, which will emerge, where part of content is free and part of it is kind of going to be paid for. As an advertiser, ultimately it depends on two things. It'll depend on which is the platform that is giving me the consumers that I need, and what is the quality of engagement, both. To be very honest with you, today the data, the research, the measurement focuses more on the former, which is the numbers or the views or a more basic measure, or basically measuring reach. Money tends to flow wherever there is a higher reach. But I think as we develop more science, more AI, etc., coming in, and we're able to kind of in some way start quantifying engagement, you will then maybe start seeing some interesting dynamics come into play as to how you distribute your money. So today it's more, I would say it's still largely going through the reach and the numbers, and more, I would say, inventory-based kind of a route. But I think the minute you start building engagement and some of those metrics in, you will follow there. So the winners and losers in this, the winners are going to be the ones who are able to deliver an optimal number of consumers who stay engaged. I mean, ideally, tick both boxes. And the ones who will struggle going forward are either you don't have numbers at all, or you have numbers but you're not keeping them engaged enough. I mean, they're not coming back too often, or they don't spend enough time on the platform or whatever. So I mean, that's really the way to look at it. So if you therefore say what is our job as media, companies or media people, I mean, you therefore realize that ultimately it's all to do with the content, right? It's all to do with what are you putting onto that medium for people to first of all come to the medium and the people to stay engaged. How differentiated is that content, and what exactly is the content? And actually, I mean, this is my personal view. I really think overall as an industry, we have in the last few years especially skewed too much towards the technology side, the data side, the measurement side, and all of that. And ultimately, we're in the business. I mean, all of us should realize that we're in the ideas or content of the creative business, all of us as media companies, agencies, or whatever else, because that is what drives everything else. So yeah, so that's probably the way to look at it. And I
So
don't-
just a now between news, entertainment, infotainment, social sharing, the many forms.
yeah.
On which one will you bet on for advertisement to flow? Or it will be across, or it will be one of them.
Yeah, I don't think one can pick a winner or loser amongst genres. Like I said, I think it all has to do with which of the within a genre, which are the publishers, which are the platforms which gives you both the reach as well as the engagement on a consistent basis. So and like the way it's happening today, it'll happen. I mean, if you can cherry pick programs and create a TV media plan or a print media plan, cherry pick slots and create a digital plan. And remember, a lot of this is also, I mean, already programmatic, or the machines decide, the algorithms decide. So that's the way it will be. So I think, yeah, it's difficult to call out one genre versus another. Frankly, I mean, all genres can do well depending on the content that you serve.
Thank you.
Thank you, CVL. I have a
Amy, can I ask Srini a question?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, Srini, hi. You could say that, with WPP as a group and the entire ecosystem of the Times fraternity, there are some kind of similarities. Both are very dominant. They play very dominant roles in the industries, in the businesses that they operate in. So you being the country head of WPP, and after being the business head of the media unit, you became the country head of the entire enterprise, of the larger group. So obviously cost efficiencies will be the first thing that you would have looked at, and there'll be increased collaboration and efficiency. But with respect to getting a higher share of wallet of the consumer or the client, or to further business, what kind of learnings would you have as a country manager of WPP that we can transpose to our own group?
Okay, so maybe I can just share with you the 5 things we're trying to do as WPP, and I mean, you can say it's learnings and it's everything else, but it's really our agenda, and I can kind of openly share with you, because when we created a country management structure, we did not want to treat this structure as hierarchy, as super boss of the market or an overhead, but a structure that can really add value to the group. And remember, we never had an active country management structure anywhere in the world, so now we have it for the top 20 markets. So the principles that we laid out is, and I think it's, like you very rightly said, Sudha, that's a great observation. I think very similar to the Times Group. So WPP is an aggregation of very strong brands. So O&M is a very strong brand, Group M is a very strong brand, and Wunderman Thompson, etc. So we don't want to dilute any of our brands. We don't want to dilute any of our cultures. In fact, we want to only strengthen them, because we believe our power is in the fact that we have all these brands. But yet, what are some of the things that we can do better only if we come together as a group? So those are the things that we will focus on as WPP. Everything else we'll leave to the experts to handle. The best creative brains, the best media brains, they all work for WPP and they know their job, and obviously they will do all of that. But the 5 areas which we are focusing on, first and foremost, what we call client centricity. So we bring the disparate different arms of WPP to work in a very joined up manner today for clients. So we started with a top 10 client program. Today for our, Unilever, P&G, Vodafone, Mondelez, etc., top 10 clients, we work very differently from the way we used to work a couple of years ago. So we have, while people continue to belong to different agencies, we have a designated WPP team leader, and people work in a more joined up fashion. What this has done for us is we have slowly moved up the value chain in all of these cases, and today we are not just creating ads and doing media plans for clients, but we're getting to strategic areas, new product development, portfolio rationalization, go-to-market strategies, etc. In fact, some of the briefs we have got in the last 6 months would have otherwise gone to one of the big 4 consulting companies. So that's giving us results because it's positioning us differently and moving us up the value chain. Second area of focus is every business today has to pivot around technology and data, right? Now, if 40 companies in WPP all try to transform and change and do their own thing, is one way of doing it. But a more efficient way of doing it is, how do you create a backbone of technology data which all companies can and partnerships that all companies can leverage. So today, whether it's with the Googles, Facebooks, InMobis, Adobe's, Salesforces of the world, all the tech companies, data companies, we have a pan WPP kind of a partnership so that all companies can benefit and we get certain value as a group, which we can then take to our clients. So that's the second part. The third area, of course, is talent. How do we upskill talent? Again, we think we can do it better as a group than individual companies, although individual companies have their own talent programs as well. The fourth is simplifying our structure and becoming a lot more nimble. If you have multiple companies, each company has its own support structures, things can get complicated, which is why we moved into one campus in Bombay. We'll soon move into one campus in Gurgaon as well. And a lot of back office is getting centralized. And the last but not the least, very important for us, we're also driving a social impact program in India as WPP because we believe we have to give back. So we have a few interesting initiatives there. We have a foundation, we support 20,000 kids today. We also are part of the India 2022 consortium. So we actually got together with 7-8 like-minded companies like Unilever, the Tata Group, etc. And we're driving sustainability as an agenda across corporate India. So these are some of the things we're also doing as WPP. So those are the areas which we've chosen for ourselves, and we work in a very collaborative way with the rest of the leadership team and create value for our clients through all of these.
Thanks for that insight, Srini.
Thank you, CVL. I appreciate it. I think some of those things we are doing, and some of those things we are also discussing internally in our group as well. So it's good to hear. I have a couple of questions from the group, and they've messaged me. And there's a common theme, a couple of them. There's one that says around this thing that WPP is a global player. You guys are there in every COVID market, right? If you can call it that. China, you're big in China, you're big in Europe, you're big in America, and India, of course, and South America. So you're all over the place, all over where COVID's impacted. And you must be tracking all those markets for the sake of your own business reasons and your clients. Can you share with us, as you juxtapose, compare India with some of the other markets such as China and Europe and America, how well are we doing by way of coming back out of this? This is not just media, and you as a business leader perspective, when do you think we'll start coming out? Where do you think we'll shine? Where do you think the hiccups are?
Okay, I'll quickly share just the comparison between China and India because I'm in regular touch with my counterpart, Patrick Zhu, who runs WPP in China. So China obviously started getting into major lockdowns and shutting down in the month of Jan, and they were in that state till March. The difference between China and India was that most of their cases were restricted to one geography largely, and their main business hubs, Shanghai and to a lesser extent Beijing, were not that badly affected. However, they did have a shutdown. So China, like us, they tanked in second half of Jan. They went down 70% or 80% versus year on year. In fact, they went down almost 90% versus year on year in March. They started coming back in April. Now, China has had a very strong rebound April, May onwards in terms of media spend, ad spend. When I last exchanged notes with Patrick, he was estimating, I think, the May number to be almost 80%, 85% of the May of last year, which means a couple of months after their lockdown ended, they were almost back to last year's levels. I don't think we'll follow that pattern because I think we have, and in fact, maybe 1 or 2 months back, or 1 month back, we would have said maybe we would have followed a similar pattern. But I think what has happened in the last 1 or 2 weeks tells me that maybe we will have a slightly more gradual recovery. And it's probably only around the festive season that we may start seeing some kind of an uptick.
Okay, that's a little bit sobering, but if you think about it from a media industry perspective, majority of our revenues come around the festive. And if the rebound does come at that point, we'll hopefully capture a bunch of those pennies and not lose them. One more question is that several people have asked. When brands spend money on advertising, there is, on the one hand, brand building objective. On the other hand, an ROI-based performance objective. Both exist in the spender's mind. How do you think the COVID, this lockdown, and the stress on the P&Ls has impacted that? Is that going to change? Is that going to remain the same?
Well, I think in the short run, spends are obviously going to be skewed more towards performance and more towards sale. I would say in the next 3 to 6 months, and in fact, most of the campaigns would go in that direction. But I think finally, when things are kind of getting back to normal, one can't get away from investing in brand and building brand. So I think we will go back to a more steady state kind of a split. I mean, if you look at, we've analyzed this in different ways, looking at everything from media spend to, you know, all other ways. It's roughly a 50-50 kind of split, and it will probably go back to that state in some time. But in the short run, I think people are more focused on just getting their sales back.
Performance. Yep. Super. Guys, we have time for one last question for CVL. This has been wonderful. It's been just spitfire questions and answers. It's very educational for all of us. One last question.
Let me ask this question, Sami. I will take the lead and ask this question. Hi, Srini. Srini, my question is, in the recovery that's going to happen, sector-wise, if you could throw some light on how do you see which sectors are going to take the lead as early starters in the next 2 or 3 months, or in the next 2 months, and maybe then closer to the festive, which are the other sectors that you see will follow through? And where do you see, what is your estimate of which sectors will lag the recovery?
Okay, I mean, I'm not really an expert on this, but I just think if you look at the whole spectrum from quicker recovery, or even before recovery, quicker to invest versus slower to invest, if I look at it that way, FMCG, most parts of FMCG is already back and will be back. Any brand or service which is obviously a tech-based, direct to consumer, including e-com and, you know, edtech and all of that, obviously are in overdrive and will continue to be in that fashion. Insurance products, insurance as an ad category, as you know, has suddenly woken up and you know, spending a lot of money, and that will continue. And to an extent, some of the other financial services. So I think these are the sectors that will drive the ADEX in the immediate short term. There are 1 or 2 interesting ones which could go either way. Media and entertainment being one of them. It's an emerging sector. It's got maybe 7-8% of the total ADEX. And you can't also discount the government sector, which is about 10-12% of the total ADEX. And then consumer durables, which have actually been under pressure for many quarters. A lot of, I think, you know, pent up, supply, etc. Not so much on demand maybe, but trying to kind of sell their way out of this mess. So I think these 3-4 sectors would be next. The ones which are challenged are auto, although I know there are some auto players who have a lot of launches and therefore they could spend. But I'm saying as a sector, telco is quite challenged. We all know real estate is challenged. Traditional retail is challenged. So I think some of these will take more time.
All right, thank you.
Super. This has been wonderful, CVL. I think I like to keep myself 45 minutes. We overshot by 10. That's on a good day. We are happy about it. Thank you so much for taking the time. If you have any questions for any of us, happy to answer. But you know, any questions for us? The whole group is here.
No, firstly, thanks for the opportunity to, first of all, get to meet all of you. So many friends on one screen. Probably hasn't happened in the last 2 months at least. I've been doing some of these sessions, but I haven't ever done a session with so many familiar faces and so many very dear and very close friends. So thanks for the opportunity, first of all. I just found that one question very interesting, and I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to work even more closely together. When you spoke about, one of you spoke about, you know, bundling your offer as the Times Group across different platforms and throwing in all the other assets that you have and all the knowledge, insights, and everything else that you bring to the table as Times. I think that would be very interesting. I mean, we are in our own way, we're trying to do it as WPP, trying to just harness the power of one company. And yeah, I wouldn't say we've done too much. We've tried to do something, but whatever little we've done, I think we're seeing the value of that. So I think if you're on the same, headed in the same direction, it'll be very interesting. It'll be very interesting for two of us to kind of partner on that journey.
You bet. Once this lockdown finishes, we'll grab coffee and chat. Definitely.
One last thing I must say, because in all the interactions I used to have with Shiva and with, of course, with BC, when I was at the Times Group, you know, so much of time was spent talking about, you know, the need to, you know, bring about the awareness of brand building, advertising, and all of that. And I think that the treaties and what has now become brand capital, I think is an amazing model in that regard, right? I mean, really empowering entrepreneurs to invest in brand building because of the kind of product or the service that you now have. So I think it's a very interesting time now, given first of all, obviously people have less capital and are more worried, and I think as a nation we just need to emerge stronger. So I think at a very I would say strategic and a more nation building level, I think the role of the Times Group in particular is probably more important than any time before. And there's anything that we can do as partners, we'd be very, very happy to partner with you to kind of just stir up the place. I think we are sitting in a land of opportunity. We just need few of us to get together and show the way out and get more entrepreneurs to invest in brands and to help those who can't invest with whatever services and models. So I'm very happy to have a discussion with you going forward to see what we can do to get our great nation back up and running.
Super. I think that is totally in order. I think the more we stir the pot in times like this, I've heard more than once that great companies come out of crisis. And that is proven true in 87, 2001, 2008, 9, and that'll happen again now, CVL. And I think crisis also bring new bedfellows, so to speak. And hopefully we will come together and do something interesting.
Sure.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you for taking the time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Srini.
Thanks, Srini. Bye. I'm going to reach out to you, Srini.
Sure.
See you on the other side of the crisis.
Yeah.
Thanks, Srini. Bye.
Thank you.
Okay.